Shabbat Shalom, my friends. Well, December 24th is the 6th day of Chanukah. So I have just one last chance to wish each of you a Chag Urim Sameach. Have a joyous, light-filled celebration. December 21st was the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. Winter has officially begun where most of us live. So good news. The Chanukah message is already winning the battle against darkness as each new day brings with it just a little bit more light. And as we celebrate Chanukah, the Christian world will celebrate Christmas, and we wish all of our Christian followers a joyous Christmas. Within the Jewish community, a profoundly American ritual will be observed on the night of the 24th, a ritual somehow involving Chinese food. I would love to receive any teachings from Rashi, Ibn Ezra, other commentators regarding this widely observed, somehow sacred practice. Our Sedra is Miketz, Genesis 41:1 and following. The story is wonderfully familiar. Having had two dreams that he cannot understand, Pharaoh brings Joseph up from prison to do the interpretations. With modesty and humility, Joseph does an excellent job, and soon enough he is appointed second only to Pharaoh in Egypt. Subsequently, there is a famine that reaches throughout the region, and Joseph's brothers appear before him seeking relief. Joseph, somewhat cruelly, toys with his brothers since he recognized them, but they did not recognize him. The stage is being set now in the book of Genesis for the family of Jacob to move to Egypt. Slavery will soon follow. Interesting things begin to happen in the background of this story. When Joseph proves accurate in his interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams, Pharaoh not only promotes him, but gives him a new name, Tzafnat Vaneach, the one who speaks on behalf of a living God, an interpreter of God's words, and a wife, Asnat, the daughter of an Egyptian priest. And our text adds, quote, "And now Joseph came to be in charge of the land of Egypt." First came the name change, then came the approved marriage, and only then the promotion. A second interesting thing, in Joseph's first interactions with his brothers, he used an interpreter. That was a useful ploy because Joseph could then understand what the brothers were saying among themselves because they assumed he would not know their language. Joseph was living in two worlds. And for Jews, that's not all that strange. A Chanukah menorah came back to Kiel, Germany this week. This was the very Chanukiah that appeared in what now is proclaimed to be an iconic photo from 1931. The photo was taken of a Chanukiah with all 9 candles in place, positioned in a street-facing window. Directly across the street, a Nazi flag was flying. Its image was caught by the camera at the very same time Chanukiah swastika. The granddaughter of the woman who took the photo was invited to come to Kiel during Chanukah for a special public observance. Two worlds. A very Jewish way to live. Several weeks ago, an Israeli scientist with the last name of Cohn was being interviewed on French television when he was asked why he was wearing a kippah. Not knowing the French law regarding laicism, he was stunned. In France, people are expected to keep physical symbols of their religious identities private because the state is officially, by law, secular. The law was really meant as an anti-Muslim law, but our two worlds were nevertheless impacted. This week, President Vladimir Zelensky was invited to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Biden to conduct a press conference with Biden and then to address a joint session of the Senate and the House. By all accounts, the visit was a resounding historic success. Zelensky then immediately returned to the battlefield, which is his home. At the press conference, President Biden went out of his way to speak of Zelensky as a modern Maccabee, fighting to bring light back into the world. At his address to Congress, Zelensky offered words of hope and prayer for those observing Christmas. Zelensky the Jew is very much among those who live in two worlds. When Joseph's family finally does move to Egypt, as we will discuss next week, they were told by Joseph to settle in the land of Goshen, far from the Egyptian population centers. After all, they were shepherds. And in Egyptian terms, they were at the very bottom rung of the social ladder. To protect his own position, Joseph wanted them far removed from the public eye. It just wouldn't do for the second in command of Egypt to be associated with such an unacceptable lot. One of the true freedom-granting pleasures of living in Israel is that we can be warmly invited to inhabit one world, not two. The Jew in the street, the Jew in the theater, the Jew in the home, the Jew in the grocery store, the Jew in the Knesset, all have a seamless identity. Of course, there are many Jewish tribes in Israel, and each of these tribes hold tenaciously to their own particular identity. Haredi, secular, Sephardi, Ethiopian, radical left, radical right, all see themselves as different from all the other tribes. But at the core, they are all Jews publicly and privately. One world. It isn't so simple in the United States. Of course, there are no restrictions on how we display our religious identities in public. I've conducted Shabbat candlelighting, Kiddush, Motzi in a very low, respectful voice in a number of public restaurants. No problem. And of course, there are no restrictions on how we observe our traditions at home. Yes, there is a rising, frightening tide of anti-Semitism in our country, but it has not yet risen to the point of suggesting that we should deny who we are. And yeah, we are left very uncomfortable by Bernie Madoff and his Ponzi scheme, and we are very uncomfortable today with Sam Bankman-Fried and the collapse of FTX. But with all of this, we feel no need to conceal our identities. In that space, created by the freedoms that we do have, the challenge is how to fill our unified identity, Jewish, private and public, with meaning and purpose. We are Jews in our homes. There are no Nazi flags flying across the street. So we ask, what is it about our homes that gives full expression to what it means to us that we are Jews in our homes and we are Jews in public? How do we live with our personal codes of ethics, with our support for cultural and communal affairs, for our financial and personal support for Jewish institutions, with our outspoken leadership in the battles for justice and racial and gender equality, outspoken leadership. The public and the private spheres are not the same no matter when we live or where we live. They never were. But unlike Joseph, we don't have to choose. We can embrace both. So what do we do with that unique freedom in 21st century America? How can both of our identities bring blessings to others and meaning to ourselves? Chanukah, how can we serve to bring more light into our world? Good questions, right? In the house, outside, one Jewish identity. What are we doing with them? Shabbat Shalom. See you next week.